matted frogs, or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with my wonderful co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are going to bring you an hour of incredible radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your pets and your gardens and the shrubs outside your house, and basically everything and everyone that you know, because all of us are together here, like it or not, wrapped up in this little ball called Earth. And so I've got a really interesting show for you today because unfortunately I'm broadcasting from home today because I woke up, speaking of being affected by the environment, woke up with a, really runny nose, feeling kind of nasty. So I decided to do the show from home rather than expose Rebecca and Josh to whatever it is inside me right now. I don't think it's the COVID. It just feels like a regular cold, but it's best not to take that chance. So here we are, and hopefully at some point you're going to join us during this hour, because this is a call-in show, and we love to get calls from listeners at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. Or you can text anytime during this hour at 419-973-5841, and we'll drop everything and read your text on the air, because we just love that feedback, loved hearing from people. And you're going to potentially want to do some feedback this week, because we're going to get very topical on For a Green Future. First of all, though, right after, we're going to chat for another 10 minutes or so here. Then we're going to hear from Lisa Maatz, who is with our friends at Ohio Citizen Action. And regular listeners know that a substantial percentage of this show has been dedicated to trying to stop that horrible House Bill 6. And much of it has been repealed, but Lisa is leading the fight to repeal the last bits of it. I would say, some of the most offensive parts, where what was supposed to be an anti-global warming bill turned out to be a subsidized old polluting coal plant bill. And she's going to bring us up to date on that at about quarter after. Then we hear from our wonderful advertisers and sponsors, just people that Rebecca and I can't praise enough. And then Rebecca is going to have a little something for us. Rebecca, what will you be discussing today?
I will be discussing the Maroon peoples of both North and South America.
Maroon peoples. That sounds interesting. All right, then on to ecological news. And then that's it. That's our show. And let's, as I say, I hope we hear from you guys soon. One person that I am also going to hear from this coming week, as you know, we had Pat Morita on a few weeks ago talking about this horrible House Bill 434 that would essentially turn Ohio into a radioactive waste zone by giving a panel of industry insiders complete control over Ohio's radioactive waste policies. It's called the Authority, which does sound kind of big brotherish and nasty. But anyway, this authority would be untouchable by any elected official, and they would just be able to put nukes wherever they want or nuke waste wherever they want, blah, 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 blah. So I actually called my legislator the way you're supposed to, and he actually agreed to meet with me. So I'm going to go visit with my Representative Haraz Ghanbari on Tuesday and try to dissuade him from doing this terrible thing to the citizens of Ohio off into essentially infinity. I mean, when you're putting wastes in the ground, radioactive wastes, when you're introducing them into the environment, and these wastes are toxic for going on 200,000 years. Some of them actually, like some of the uranium isotopes, are actually dangerous for literally billions of years. We can use the word permanent. It's permanent as far as us humans are concerned. I mean, one of the things that the pro-nuclear trolls like to brag about is they say, oh, well, you know, nuclear waste goes away by itself because it decays naturally. And yeah, but the half-lives of some of these isotopes are so long that it's permanent. And so in return for a little bit of money, some of these authority figures are going to theoretically, if they get their way, be able to just dump nuclear wastes wherever they want in the state of Ohio. And so we're going to try to prevent that from happening. So let's see. It's a 10 after, and as I said, I woke up kind of off this morning, so I could really use a text or a phone call today to help me bridge this gap. So we got the weather's getting nice. A lot of birds have returned. Last night I did this big long walk around Bowling Green and saw a flock of robins. So for me, those were the first robins of spring. And I think it's going to happen, folks. Don't worry. Spring is coming. I mean, even though it may not seem like it right now, but there's signs. And as we reported last week, the Maumee has already thawed. So the warmer temperatures are well on their way, and probably in a month or so we're going to be wishing it wasn't quite so warm. So Rebecca, how are you and Koga doing today?
Not too badly. We're being quiet right now. We're being good puppies.
Okay. That's great. Okay, well, let's see. So Josh, has our guest called in yet? Okay, so we'll just wait a little bit on her. And one thing I wanted to mention, I want to tell you folks about something I'm going to do here in March that is totally anti-environmental. I'm going to do probably the worst thing people can do in terms of environmentalness, and that is I'm going to go on a cruise. I'm going to go on a cruise to the Mediterranean. And the reason is that my wife, of our entire relationship, she talked about, the whole 41 years that I knew her, she talked about going on cruises, wanting to go on a cruise, and I always resisted because I was like, man, that's a lot of global warming, and the ships do all kinds of nasty stuff to the ocean. But in 2019, I finally said, all right, we can go on a cruise. She wore me down. It took 40 years, but she did it. And so we scheduled a cruise, and then COVID hit, and the cruise got canceled. So we rescheduled it, and then COVID didn't go away, so we had to reschedule it again. And we rescheduled for this March. And unfortunately, as you know, if you're a regular listener, she passed away in December, and so I'm not able to go with her, but I have the tickets, and I'm gonna just go ahead and do it. And what I intend to do is broadcast from the ship, because I will have internet. Sort of go with sort of the reporter's eye on the whole thing, and let you folks know exactly what's good and what's bad about cruise ships, because they're trying to clean up their image. They do things that are supposed to help mitigate their damage, and they're talking about doing things like adding sails to cruise ships when they're out on the open ocean, and these are sort of kite type sails, which you anchor them to the boat and you put them up, like 500, 1,000 feet up in the air, where the winds are quite strong and quite steady, and they're saying they could cut off like 25% of their fuel use by adding these sorts of fixed sails. And that's something that we will be talking about in a future show, because that technology of putting a kite essentially up high up in the air where the winds are steady and strong, and using that to generate energy, that's kind of a technology that's taking off, because it's relatively cheap. I mean, you just have to have like a fixed parachute type device, and you stick it up there, and because it's constantly pulling, you can use that to generate power. And so that's something that we might help us mitigate global warming in the future. So sorry, folks, I just wanted to give you a heads up. That's going to be happening in March. And, if you want to pan me for that on Facebook or whatever, go ahead. I can take it. All right. So our guest has joined us, and I think we're going to go talk now to Lisa. Hello, Lisa. How are you?
Hi, Joe. How are you? Good to be with you this morning.
Good to be with you, too. Could you give us your actual title?
Sure. I'm Lisa Maatz. I am the Senior Advisor at Ohio Citizen Action.
Okay, Lisa. And I asked you on because there's something interesting going on legislatively there. They're trying to kill, I guess if you look at House Bill 6 as like the Hydra, with all those different heads, this is like the last head of the Hydra, right? Of House Bill 6.
Yeah, we're trying at this point to pass a couple of bills that would repeal the rest of House Bill 6. We'd still like to get, by the way, the clean energy stuff back that we lost when House Bill 6 was passed. But in terms of the bailouts that were included in House Bill 6, we've managed to get rid of the nuclear bailout. But now we need to get rid of the coal bailout, the OVEC bailout, the Ohio Valley Electric Corporation. These are the ones that are getting about $287,000 a day from ratepayers, from you and me here in Ohio, to prop up these failing, uber-polluting coal plants. Two of them, actually one's in Indiana, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, we know, and but the pollution from both plants is affecting people and especially children in Ohio, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Since 2020 alone, they've spewed out more than 26 million pounds of carbon dioxide into obviously our already warming atmosphere. And I would say people, particularly in the southern part of the state, are really affected by this pollution because the one in Indiana, the plant in Indiana in particular, sends that pollution, it flows east. So it's going right over the Cincinnati area on a daily basis.
Yeah, I remember during the House Bill 6 testimony that there was a physician, a pediatrician from Cincinnati who said, my kids are suffering from this pollution.
Oh yeah, no, it's a clear problem, and the thing that's most annoying about so much of this, as you well know, Joe, is how much of this could already have been avoided. I mean, these are plants that have been in place really pre-Cold War, and they have been poorly managed and spewing out not only this pollution, but also, the coal ash ponds that also create localized issues and then can get into the water table. They should have been put out of commission years ago, decades ago, quite frankly. And the fact that they haven't is really, to me, an ultimate testament of greed, because the utilities, the for-profit utilities that are running them, keep coming to the Ohio General Assembly with their hands out, looking for bailouts for these poorly managed plants. And they grease their palms with campaign contributions and, like with House Bill 6, kind of get what they want. And that's really what happened here, Joe. I'm not sure if you're aware of the backstory there, but, House Bill 6 was supposed to be just about the nuclear bailout, and that was for First Energy. And we all know how corrupt that has been in terms of the bribery scheme. That's an ongoing scandal here in the state and nationwide, quite frankly. But as a result, the other utilities came and said, we're not going to support this unless you give us money too. And they wanted money for OVEC, even though they already had some money that, unfortunately, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio had already approved as a bailout. They wanted the bailout extended and expanded, and that's exactly what they got in House Bill 6. Yeah,
I did know that backstory because when I testified against House Bill 6 the first time, I was actually the second person to testify about it. The first person was an AEP representative, and he was there saying things like, we could support this. I look forward to working with you. Dick Stein, the chairman of the committee, started drooling, when he at the idea that, we might get something out of this. But yeah, I remember it was originally an anti-global warming bill, and then all it's ended up doing is subsidizing coal. So,
that's right.
Tell us about these bills and what sort of support they have in the legislature.
Yeah, so we have a real opportunity here, and that's because there are two bills. On the Senate side, it's SB117, and on the House side, it is House Bill 351. And we've got a real opportunity here because these have been introduced by Republicans, and they have bipartisan support. So we've got Senator Romanchuk as the lead on SB117, and Representative Laura Lanise, who is particularly passionate about this, as the lead on House Bill 351. And most recently, we've even gotten Governor DeWine's support when he was asked directly about the OVEC bailouts. He essentially said he would support a bailout, that he doesn't, especially with money going to an Indiana plant and so forth. So the reality
just to be clear, he would support repealing the bailout.
He would support repealing the bailouts, correct. And what we see here is a great opportunity. But what we have, unfortunately, are legislative leaders that don't want to bring these bills to the floor. And quite frankly, we just want them to vote already. Just vote already. Because we really feel like if these bills are given a fair shot with a vote on the floor, they'll pass, because they have bipartisan support, and we know the governor will sign these two repeal bills. But Huffman and Cupp, the president of the Senate, Huffman, and Speaker of the House, Cupp, have not shown any kind of courage here. We're really, with the campaign that we're moving forward with, are just asking them to do their jobs. Just vote already. You have a bipartisan bill. It's got enough support. This is what you're supposed to be doing in the Ohio General Assembly, isn't it? You're supposed to be passing bills that are the will of the people. And so we're encouraging everyone to call their senators and call their reps. You can also send a letter to them on our website. It's as simple as going to ohiocitizen.org/repeal OVEC. So that's ohiocitizen.org/repeal OVEC, OVEC. And there's a ready-made letter there for you that you can adapt. We need to inundate these folks and just tell them to vote already.
Yeah, you made an important point there that whenever they've been polled, overwhelmingly Ohioans hated every aspect of House Bill 6, especially this coal bailout part. One thing I wanted to ask you was, where are the bills in terms of legislative? Have they been heard in a committee? Have they been assigned to a committee? Where are they that way?
Yeah, no, they've been heard in both committees of jurisdictions, and they've had the hearings, the appropriate hearings, and now, quite frankly, they're idling. And Senator Romanchuk and Representative Lanise are doing the best they can to get them unstuck, but we really need to ramp up some public support to make sure this is happening. We know the public supports them in principle because it's money coming out of their pockets every month, and nobody likes pollution in their kids' lungs. So, but we also know in the General Assembly that we have enough support based on who was testifying in favor of these bills. The only people testifying against them were the utilities, who were the ones standing there looking for a handout from the Ohio taxpayers. So, what we need the leadership in those committees, as well as the leadership in the General Assembly, to do is recognize that and just schedule the vote. I mean, what are they afraid of? If they really think it's so bad, it'll get voted down. But just schedule the vote already. Let's have it out and be done with it. We think it's going to pass, and then we will see the last of House Bill 6.
That'd be wonderful. But could you mentioned that how part of what House Bill 6 did was eliminate the good supports for clean energy that the state used to have. Could you just run through that real quick?
Well, there used to be some programs to encourage not only clean energy, but energy waste reduction and renewables, using, appropriate, say, light bulbs and stuff like that, programs to teach people about how to use the most energy efficient kinds of products. And a lot of that was repealed in House Bill 6. So obviously we'd like to see that put back. But truthfully, Joe, if we're really going to talk about comprehensive energy policy for Ohio, you have to go to the Energy Jobs and Justice Act, right? Because that bill, which has been introduced by Representative Weinstein, is absolutely the comprehensive Ohio policy, energy policy that we've been lacking. Thus far, it's really been catch as catch can, whatever the utilities want, very little kind of long-term thinking. And the Energy Jobs and Justice Act not only looks at how we can promote renewables and improve that situation in the state, but it's also about jobs, about these clean energy jobs, where Ohio, quite frankly, could be leading the way. We actually have an amazing wind industry here in Ohio in terms of building the actual apparatus, the equipment needed for wind power. But unfortunately, our own state government doesn't want wind, has so many restrictions on wind power that we're not building wind farms in Ohio as a result. So there's a real kind of mixed message thing going on here that the Energy Jobs and Justice Act would address.
Yeah, we have talked about that before, and I am a little concerned. It's not clear if there's support for nuclear or not in that legislation. That's a good question, and I would certainly refer you to Representative Weinstein and some others about their intentions. I know that there are some other clean energy bills out there that do also support or have some support for nuclear, but Ohio Citizen Action does not support nuclear energy, and we would be very concerned about that moving forward. All right. Well, we really appreciate you folks up there at Ohio Citizen Action, and thanks for fighting this fight. And Ohio made worldwide headlines when House Bill 6 passed as being like the most regressive energy policy in one of the most in the world, because of the fact that it both got rid of the good stuff and subsidized the bad stuff. So it would be really nice for us to make headlines again, as you say, becoming a leader in clean energy instead of a follower in dirty energy.
That's right. And truthfully, a leader in creating these clean energy jobs, because they're out there. And because of regressive bills like House Bill 6 that, unfortunately tip the scales to dirty energy, to polluting energy, we've already had evidence of clean energy jobs being taken away from the state that had, thought about investing here. And then they saw the handwriting on the wall legislatively and said, nope, Ohio's not the place for us. We're going to go invest and create jobs in other states. We can't have that. We must be able to compete. And those, quite frankly, are the kinds of jobs Ohioans like and are used to and that we excel at, manufacturing jobs and technology jobs. So it's time to bring those back. It's time to be welcoming to those kinds of economic investments, and the only way to do it, truthfully, is to show them that we're hospitable to the kind of energy they want to produce, to the clean energy that's not only good for Ohioans, but it's good for the economy, too.
Hear, hear. Well, Lisa, thanks for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything we haven't covered yet?
I just want to make sure people know that they really need to call their state reps and call their state senators about this. As I mentioned earlier, they can send an email on our website, but they can also call the State House, and they need to tell them to vote yes. To just vote already is really the message on SB117 and HB351.
Okay. Thanks so much, Lisa. And
thanks, Joe, for having me. Take care.
You too. Have a good day. All right. So, what did you think about our little discussion with Lisa? Do you agree with her and the majority of Ohioans, or are you like, coal is great? I don't know. We did get a text message while we were doing that interview. We appreciate it. And the question here is, what is your opinion about Russian troops capturing Chernobyl? And we're actually going to talk about that in the ecological news segment. I've got some stuff sort of lined up to talk about that. But right now, we're going to hear from our advertisers and patrons. Yay! Four Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There's several ways you can find out what's going on at the Wood County Parks. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Also, you can go to their website, wcparks.org, and they have a nifty app. You go to any app store and search for WC Parks, and then just stick that on your phone, and you can keep up with what they're doing. And they're also on many other social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc., etc., etc. Just search for the Wood County Park District. And they put out a press release. This is not part of their advertising time, but they actually won second place in a statewide competition because they had a program called the Geo Chase last year, where you could go and try to pretend to be a superhero, and using instructions that you were left at the various parks, you chased a supervillain around. And it was a great program, got a lot of people out to the parks walking around, which is a good thing. And so congratulations to the Wood County Park District on that. Four Green Future is also brought to you by our patrons. And patrons are incredibly sympathetic, wonderful, helpful people who have gone to patreon.com, and there they searched for For a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, and all they did was pick a monthly donation level that matched their budget. And every month a little bit comes out of their account and comes over to us, and that's how we can manage to keep this amazing show on the air, where you're hearing stuff you're not going to hear anywhere else, and guests you're not going to hear anywhere else, and we're happy to bring them to you. But unfortunately, we do need patrons, and we need people helping us out in order to do that. And so please consider becoming a Patreon patron. Okay, Rebecca, how are you doing? Are you still there?
I am still here, I'm fairly sure.
Okay, so I think you're here too, because I'm hearing you. So What do you have to talk to us about this week?
Okay, well, I wanted to talk about a phenomenon that happened mostly in the early days of the North Atlantic slave trade, but sometimes at other times, when white European traffickers tended to make a mistake and forget that just because you are afraid of places like jungles and swamps and mountains does not necessarily mean that people you have kidnapped from jungles, swamps, and mountains are also going to find them so scary that they would rather stay and grow your sugarcane. So, a thing would happen.
This is a Black History Month appropriate story, then.
It is, yeah. And it marks a whole sort of a reminder that in their initial experience of the New World, lots of black Africans experience the environment as a place of safety and freedom, where they could escape white oppression. And so a lot of them got off the boat, looked around, and said, "Well, no, thank you for the ride, but we think jungles are nice, cozy places with lots of great food sources, and we're going to go check out this new jungle." And these people were called the Maroons. This is a term that encompasses a lot of different people. The Garifuna and Muskogos people, Black Seminoles, Bushinengue, Jamaican Maroons, Kalungas, Palenqueros, Quilombolas, and the Cimarron people of Panama, and the Great Dismal Swamp Maroons as well.
So this happened in a lot of different places.
Yeah, because being a slave was no fun.
Right.
And living far, far away in wild natural areas and being a hunter-gatherer and or doing small subsistence agriculture seemed like a much better idea. So lots of people did it. They voted with their feet. An example of this in North America would be the Black Seminoles. They arose in Spanish Florida, and then later they got relocated to Oklahoma. They were both free blacks and escaped slaves. And some of them also have migrated at this point to Texas, the Andros Islands in the Bahamas, and Coahuila, Mexico is a big place. Their status was also slaves among the Seminoles, but they really didn't have the same kind of... we see a lot of evidence from a lot of different cultures that American slavery was really the worst, maybe because it was pretty much permanent. In a lot of ways, people in Africa did not know what they were really selling other Africans into, because it was not like the slavery they had where people could sort of work their ways up, and some slaves had higher positions in society than free people. You had no rights forever, and neither did your children and grandchildren in many cases. So Seminole slaves were allowed to have firearms, for example, or other weapons, because I guess, to some extent they sort of were like, well, you have to work for us if you're going to live around here, but, go ahead, do your thing in your free time. It was not as oppressive in a lot of ways. So, yeah, eventually there's been an issue since they've been living in Oklahoma. There was some kind of a large settlement, monetary settlement for seizing the lands in Florida. And let's see, a lot of the Black Seminoles are excluded because of something called the Dawes Rolls in the 1800s, which, if you looked black to people, they would classify you as a freedman instead of a Seminole. So they just kind of got cleaned out of these rolls. It's not really clear whether it's the Seminole tribe that is behind this exclusion, or if it's really just a white thing. I didn't do enough reading to find that out. But yeah, there's still today there's still the Caesar Brunner Band and the Dosar Barkus Band that are on the General Council of the Seminole Nation. Another example, the Great Dismal Swamp Maroons. These were people in Virginia and North Carolina in the 1700s to 1860s. This band is apparently disbanded. They've more or less, disappeared or been assimilated. But apparently, when America, way back in the 1700s, early 1700s, there wasn't really a legal institution of slavery, so the Africans were... trafficked Africans were referred to as indentured servants, and they could eventually buy their way out of slavery, but still no one had actually asked them if they wanted to be indentured servants, so kind of the same thing. But a lot of them either ran away or bought their way out, or served their term and were like, okay, I've not enjoyed my experience in the white farming industry. I'm gonna go live in a swamp. So apparently Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book about this community called Dread Something, and then a big long subtitle. So that was another thing that she wrote. And also they were used extensively to drain and log the swamps, and that maybe where some of them slipped away and decided to live in out of doors, where it was nicer and no white people bothered you. There's also the Garifuna peoples. They were on St. Vincent Island in the Caribbean, and were eventually exiled to the Honduran coast and moved to Belize. They pretty much, mostly they like to do agriculture and fishing, but many of them have moved into Creole communities and they have regular jobs in cities. They're apparently part part African, part island, the Kalingo Taino, which is the island Caribs, and they're also described as part Caribs / Arawak. Arawak or Arawak was a term that they would just call Europeans would just call unfriendly natives they found Caribs, and friendly ones Arawaks. And today, Arawak is used to describe a language family or a whole sort of bunch of different related people. So nobody really knows what it means. Yada yada. And then there are the Cimarron peoples of Panama, who were both enslaved native Panamanians and Africans who all just kind of ran away and formed whole little towns sort of adjacent to the other towns. Interestingly, they fought with Francis Drake against Spain in the Anglo-Spanish War between 1585 and 1604. This was a war that involved mostly privateering, sort of legalized piracy, but Francis Drake also sacked a couple of ports. So I don't know what the deal is, including St. Augustine. They sacked St. Augustine, Florida. I don't know if they were sort of on shore helping him out, or if they were on his ships, or what the deal was. The term Cimarron is probably the source of the word Maroon, and both of them mean wild or untamed, or there's some sort of story that the word might be related to an Arawak word for spear path or something, but that most experts think that's not true. So yeah, the Cimarrons in Panama were pretty feisty. They had a history of attacking towns and stealing treasure even before Francis Drake found them. And at one point the Spanish were like, okay, we're gonna come, burn down your town, and we're coming for you. And they hung up a gallows between their town and the regular town as a way of saying, yeah, come on, you're going to meet a bad end if you come here. So they were just sort of very aggressive in their declining of in being involved in European society, which they did not have any good associations with, I guess. And right. So
that Harriet Beecher Stowe novel, according to the internet, was a Dread, D-R-E-D, a tale of the Great Dismal Swamp. And that's pretty interesting. I have to say I hadn't heard of the Maroon people before, so it's good to know. Anything else?
To some extent, the Gullah and Melungeon peoples are sort of related, because Melungeons are a bunch of people, sort of triracial people who probably were black freedmen who interbred with both white people and Native Americans, and so were the Gullah to some extent.
Okay. All right. Well, we got to move on. We got a lot of echo news to get to, but thanks very much, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
And here we go with ecological news. First story, and this is one that we're kind of unique on. I have not seen any of this in the usual environmental press, but Martha Williams has been confirmed as the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She was President Biden's pick, and she's terrible. She came to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from Montana. She used to run the Montana Fish and Wildlife, Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And so all these terrible things that we've been reporting on for years around Yellowstone, like the slaughter of the bison and now the slaughter of the wolves, she turns out to have been the architect of those things, because she directed the Montana department from 2017 to 2020. And so it's like coming from the triumphal slaughter of so many large wild animals, so many keystone species in the U.S., she's been rewarded now. She's director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And it's very interesting because a lot of the smaller, more active environmental organizations are kind of like, this is terrible. We can't do this. But a lot of the bigger, well-funded ones that send you calendars in the mail asking for money, a lot of those are saying, oh, it's a good thing, we're looking forward to working with her. The problem is, and I looked at the White House's press statement about her, I looked at all these large environmental organizations that are supporting her and saying, oh, this is great. Not one of them was able to say anything, any accomplishment she had in terms of improving the environment or protecting wildlife, which is now her job as director of the Fish and Wildlife Service. She's not a biologist, she's a lawyer. And when she was director of the Montana, she oversaw, as I said, the destruction of the wolf, the opening of the wolf season, and she championed, she put in place this new reporting system for wolves. Used to be Montana, in order to get the number of wolves that were there, they would count them. They'd send people out into the field and they'd count them. Now, what she switched them over to is a system where they guess. They just guess how many they're supposed to be, and this guess is based on testimony from hunters. So, if you're a hunter, you're someone who's out there killing wolves because you love to kill wolves and you're willing to pay lots of money to kill wolves. As you go out there and as you're killing wolves, you're supposed to keep a count of how many wolves you actually see in addition to the numbers that you kill. And then you go back to the Fish and Wildlife Service of Montana and they say to you, so how many wolves did you see? And, did you see like 50? Because if you saw like 50, then we can keep, the numbers up, the numbers for the quota for killing them. Or did you see like 1 or 2? Because if you only saw 1 or 2, we can't keep the numbers as high. You don't get to kill as many wolves. How many did you see? And then Montana uses those numbers from the hunters to estimate how many wolves can be killed in the next season. And this season so far, they've already killed 245 wolves, according to the state website, which is roughly a quarter of the wolves that they've guessed that they estimated or in Montana based on data they got from people who have a vested interest in inflating those numbers. And they don't check, they don't go back out and say, well, is this hunter a reliable source? Are there any tracks that kind of support his claim to have seen 35 wolves? No, they just say, oh, you said 35? Here's 35. And they write that down. And so that's her. That's Martha Williams. And so this kind of belies Biden's idea that he's going to be all in on wolf protection. I am not optimistic. We'll see what she actually does. But another reason I'm not optimistic is, remember, we had Colette Atkins on last week, and she was talking about how the Center for Biological Diversity is fighting the fact that the Fish and Wildlife Service want to delist the grizzlies as just the way they did the wolves. And it turns out that Martha Williams, helped design a system is helping to put into place the same sorts of things for the grizzlies as she did for the wolves. In other words, open up hunting, depend on hunters for data, and just kill lots and lots of them. So wanted to let you folks know about that, and it's a little worrisome. Now, on to our next story, which answers our text that we got. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Ukrainian nuke situation. You may have heard speculation about this on the mainstream media. I'm sure you heard that Russia has taken control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant, and but in addition to Chernobyl, there are 15 other active nuclear power plants in 4 different locations in the country of Ukraine, and they supply 50% of Ukraine's electricity. Now, a lot of people have wondered why Russia, in all this attacking and invading, hasn't cut power to the country, hasn't just taken down the grid, because that would hurt Ukraine's ability to fight back. Well, I believe my answer, and it's supported by some other experts in the nuclear industry, is that if you cut the power to the grid, nuclear power plants cannot function without grid power. And so they immediately have to shut down. And then if there's no grid power, they have to keep the the water circulating over the fuel rods, because even if you stop the reaction, there's so much heat stored in there that if you don't keep water circulating over the fuel rods, they melt down and the nuclear plants explode. And so what would happen if Putin took out the grid? He would potentially have 15 more Chernobyls going there in the Ukraine. And as we know from the Chernobyl disaster, when a nuke plant melts down in Ukraine, prevailing winds take that radioactive fallout and dump it over Europe. And in fact, some spots in Europe, because fallout doesn't fall evenly, it gets concentrated in some places and thinned out in other places. Parts of Europe got higher levels of fallout than parts of the Ukraine did in Chernobyl. So that would give everybody else that, all those troops massed on the border with Poland and all the other NATO countries, that would give them a perfectly reasonable pretext to go in and drive Russia out. Because if Russia's triggering nuclear disasters, that hurts Europe. That's an attack, literally an attack, a radiological attack on NATO. And so I think that's what's going on here. And I think that's why they took Chernobyl, because that's there are active nuke plants in Chernobyl, not just the melted down one. And I think that if Putin manages to capture the nuke plants without them melting down, and then is able to put like military grade diesel generators there to make sure the backup power doesn't fail, because failing backup diesel generators is one of the most common problems amongst nuke plants. And if he's got people in place, radiological people who know how to shut nuclear plants down properly, if he can do that, secure all 15 of those plants, I think that's the day that he does crash the grid. And I think taking Chernobyl is kind of a step towards that strategically. But that's my opinion. And of course, if they didn't have nuclear power, they wouldn't be at the mercy of all this stuff. So that's that story. And that ties in with my next story, reminding you of the Fukushima disaster. And we're going to ask everybody to use as little grid power as possible on March 11th. And there's 4 levels that you can participate in. Level 1 is just turn off extra lights, just make a conscious effort to conserve some electricity. Level 2 is go down into your basement and throw the breakers on everything but your essentials, like your refrigerator and your sump pump and your furnace. Turn off all the others and use almost no electricity. Level 3 is disconnect from the grid and use backup power for the day. And you have to, prepare carefully to do that. But as we see, increasingly being able to do that is becoming not a luxury, but a necessity in this society. And then level 4, which is the level this year our household is at, is put more power on the grid using wind or solar than you take off the grid. So that's March 11th. Okay, on to our next story, and we're zipping right along here. Just got a few minutes left. We have been following from the beginning our friends over there at the Wet'suwet'en territory in British Columbia, where a pipeline is being forced through their unceded territory by Coastal GasLink. This past week, they were fined a whopping $72,500 because they've destroyed the environment in a whole bunch of places along their pipeline. They have, mostly it's been erosion. Their pipeline has triggered erosion that's filled up ponds, that's destroyed fishing streams. They've done it in dozens of places along this pipeline. And it's a 670 kilometer pipeline, and and I have to say, $72,500 is literally pocket change to a company like Coastal GasLink. And you have to wonder why these fines are so tiny compared to the damage they do. And in fact, a lot of these violations, a lot of these destructions and erosion events actually happened. They were found out to be last year, and the Canadian agency that's supposed to protect the environment, they fined them last year in 2020, and then went back a year later, and none of the situation they found had been fixed. And so they fined them again. And this time they went up to $72,000. But $72,000 is still cheaper than fixing any of these problems. And so probably what's going on there is that Coastal GasLink is just sitting there saying, all right, ooh, you fined us. Ow, that hurts. Don't do that again. But they're not fixing any of the problems. They're just taking the tiny little penalties and continuing to go. There's also a development on there that's happened in that conflict that I haven't reported on yet. One, and it's about a few weeks ago, about 25 masked people broke into one of the camps where they're putting this pipeline in and chased off everybody and then destroyed a whole bunch of trucks and a lot of drilling equipment and smashed it up, burned it. Well, they tried to burn it. None of it burned, but Coastal GasLink is claiming millions of dollars of damage. And, I understand the frustration that these people have because literally they're being illegally trampled on and their territory is being violated. But I don't think smashing equipment is the way to deal with that, because what often happens if this sort of thing gets started in an environmental issue, then what happens is that the focus changes from actually stopping the pipeline and protesting and protecting the environment to protecting those protesters, because now they're going to be hunted down by the RCMP and arrested, and then they're going to face trial, and it's going to have to raise lots of money to defend them. And so the focus shifts over to the people rather than the issue. I've seen it happen many times in environmental, well, not many times, but enough times to know that smashing equipment doesn't really do it. For one thing, companies have insurance, and so within a week of smashing all that equipment, they get to buy brand new equipment, just putting in for insurance. So it's a sad situation. It's getting kind of desperate up there, but Canada just proved that they're not really interested in actually holding Coastal GasLink responsible for the damage it's doing, because they could be fining them $100,000 every day for every violation. And there are dozens and dozens of violations, dozens of places where they've disrupted the environment. And so instead, they're just giving them one $72,000 fine, which proves they're on the side of the company, not on the side of the environment. All right. Wow, 10:57 already. The wolf extermination is outside of Yellowstone is continuing. Montana reached its quota in the section just around Yellowstone, 82 wolves, and so roughly a little more than a quarter of the Yellowstone wolf population's been slaughtered. The season is still open in the rest of Montana. If you want to go kill some wolves, you just got to pay some money, and you get to help wipe out one of the most important species in the North American ecosystem. All right. Well, I guess that's it, folks. I'm sorry I didn't have any good news for you this week, but next week I hope to have some. Rebecca, did you want to say anything before we close out here?
Yeah. Where should people call to oppose this new House bill they're talking about?
Oh, the House Bill 434, the one.
Yeah, that one.
Nuclear waste.
Yes.
They called their own state senator and their state house the representative, because it's passed out of committee, and so now if it goes to a vote, now the next step would be a vote before the full House. Actually, call your House member. You don't need to call your Senate member yet. It hasn't been introduced there. But
good idea.
Interested? Yeah, that would be House Bill 434. So, all right. Thanks so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off. Radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with